Yes, I think the conventional wisdom in the West has long been that Vladimir Putin was an imperialist and he was determined to conquer Ukraine and make it part of a greater Russia, or he was interested in recreating the Soviet Union. There is no evidence to support that, and all the evidence indicates that he was fearful that the West was trying to make Ukraine a bulwark, a Western bulwark on Russia's border. And the principal element of the West strategy was NATO expansion into Ukraine. Putin and his advisors made it clear for many years that this was simply unacceptable. And if the West continued to push NATO eastward into Ukraine, there would be serious trouble. And of course, that's exactly what happened. And I have no reason to change my view, because if you look at people in the West and people in Ukraine who talk about the possibility of a peace involving Ukraine and Russia, they automatically focus on the subject of NATO expansion and the question of whether Ukraine can be neutral. That tells me that my basic argument from the start was correct, that this is really, at its core, all about NATO expansion.
I said to you, what happened within Ukraine that caused Russia to take the position that it did? Now, look, there are multiple reasons. I'm going to focus in on what I believe are the two most important reasons.
Yeah.
The first one was this, is that in that particular region, in what's called the Luhansk and the Donbass region, the majority there are Russian speakers. You have a brigade in that particular part of the world, in Ukraine, called Azov Brigade. Now, they are...
Aren't they the neo-Nazis?
Well, that's right, but they are a collection of murderous, extreme, right nationalist, racist Nazis. Now, they killed between 14 and 18,000, depend on whose view you take, of Russian men, Russian women, and Russian children within that particular region. They denied them their rights to speak Russian. Their schooling had to be all in Ukrainian, and there was a great majority of people within that region who were separatists, who wanted, if they were going to be ruled, they preferred to be ruled via Moscow as opposed to via Kiev. But the way in which they were treated was disgraceful.
But apparently, Ukraine has now got them working as soldiers.
Well, you see, what's interesting is that the Americans have them working as soldiers.
Right, okay.
And what's interesting is that, it's quite funny actually in a very weird way, is that in 2016, the American Congress labeled the Ukrainian Azov Brigade as Nazis. But in 2022, they conveniently forgot that they themselves said that. And so what did Congress do? Well, they removed the ban on funding neo-Nazis from its year-end spending. I mean, how convenient. But look, the
people like that don't just disappear. They don't just like disappear into thin air.
Well, as I said to you, with who was it that said it? I think it was Henry Kissinger, former U.S. statesman. He says that America doesn't have friends; it has interests. And if you act in their interest, even if you're a Nazi, you can be rehabilitated. And essentially, that's what Congress did. They rehabilitated
the Nazis.
Yeah,
Nice.
They did. I mean, like, the only mistake that Hitler made was appearing in 1939, when really what he should have done is appear in 2022.
And he would have been America's friend, you're saying?
He would have been America's friend. And as offensive as that sounds, but as I said to you, the Azov Brigade are offensive. They are Nazi in nature, and you just have to look at the history, the recent history of the Azov, and you will find out what I'm saying is true. But look, we go back to the Luhansk and the Donbass regions. Russia could have stayed there, and the people in Moscow could have kept quiet. Well, why should they? Why should they? You had an out of control Ukrainian administration who couldn't control their own people. In fact, there were a great many in the Azov leadership that were conducting policy within the Ukrainian government, and Russia said, no, this is not going to happen. During that period, Ukraine again started to flirt with the notion of joining the EU. Of course, as I said earlier, this is a red line that both the Russian Deputy Foreign Minister and Vladimir Putin made clear that they weren't prepared to tolerate under no circumstances whatsoever. So, if you say to me, what do I think is going to happen, I can tell you what is going to happen, irrespective of what anyone says, and it's this. Look, the Russian objective, as far as I'm concerned, is to destroy the forces on the ground, in order to get the enemy to speak to them. That is very clear, no matter what anybody says. The Germans and the French, they don't want this war to escalate, for many reasons, specifically security, political and financial reasons. Look, we all know that the US is essentially an air power. And
a maritime power.
And a maritime power. They've never been a ground power. The American public are not going to tolerate, 100,000, 200,000 US soldiers coming home in body bags. They are all war gamed out. They saw what happened in the 20-year escapade in Afghanistan. Right.
So what you're saying is different. You're saying America fight wars from the air and from the sea.
Yes.
But you're saying that Russia fights on the ground, or have more people trained to fight on the ground.
No. I mean, like, both can be true at the same time. I'm saying that America traditionally, when they've engaged in warfare on the ground and troops on the ground, they have bled losses. This is a fact. You had 50 to 55,000 US troops that died in Vietnam. I can't remember the exact number in Afghanistan, but I know that many of the US soldiers, I have family who are US soldiers in America. I know that many of them have suffered greatly. I know that the suicide rate is through the roof because it's unnatural to see people with their heads blown off, with their limbs scored everywhere. It's horrendous. Look, at the end of the day, as I said to you, that under no circumstances will Ukraine be allowed to quote unquote win this conflict. I actually don't believe it's about Ukraine winning. I believe it's about Russian infrastructure being degraded. I think it's about showing the world that Russians are monsters, and I just don't believe that it's as simple as that. Look, when we speak, for example, let me just go back. Let me just leave that particular region, because in fact I could actually say that as far as I'm concerned, at the end of this war, not only will Russia, no matter what the Americans are telling you or the Brits, no matter what is said, they will lose the Donbass region. They will lose the Luhansk region. In fact, I'll go further and I will say that they will lose Kharkiv, the Kharkiv region, and they will definitely lose Odessa down in the south.
Why?
Well, they're going to lose it because that's a red line for Russia. Russia knows that Ukraine is not to be trusted. And so what they're going to do, they are going to degrade Ukraine. They're going to degrade Ukraine to the point that they cannot be a threat to them. And under no circumstances, unless whoever the policymakers are and the people leading these negotiations, as long as they believe that they will have NATO in Ukraine, Yeah, I am telling you now that we're going to be looking, at tactical nuclear weapons being used.
Tactical nuclear
Yes,
weapons?
in the first instance within Ukraine. I mean, Putin's not stupid. Putin knows that if he uses tactical nuclear weapons in a NATO country, then obviously we all know about Article 5. Of the NATO treaty.
Which is?
Well, Article 5 is a NATO treaty whereby if any one of the 31 members of NATO is attacked, then every other nation who is a member of NATO has a legal duty, an obligation, to draw arms on their behalf. Okay? And so for that reason, and for that reason alone, I think that Putin is playing a very, very clever game. Because he knows, for example, that there are 100,000 US soldiers in Poland. He knows that this war is being quarterbacked by Americans who are within Poland. But he also knows that Poland is a member of NATO.
So he won't attack Poland?
Well, at least, I think they were a member of NATO since 1999.
So he won't attack Poland?
He will not attack Poland. Yeah, he doesn't need to, but he will not. He doesn't have those aspirations. Yeah, this is what I'm telling you. If you look at the man and you cut out all the nonsense and all the noise that you hear, this is not his position. It's not his role. It's not what he wants to do. And so he will not attack Poland. But because Ukraine is not a member of NATO and it wants to become a NATO, and they are crossing that red line, and Russia doesn't have a Monroe doctrine that they should, they are not going to allow Russian missiles, because essentially that's what it is. They are not going to have Russian missiles on the border of Russia. America wouldn't accept that under any circumstances. My argument is, why should Russia accept it? And so your initial question when we started
is, how far are we away from war?
How far are we away from war? Well, let me just say, we're very close to war if the wrong decisions are made. And what causes me serious concern was something that happened within a few weeks of this conflict beginning. Who was the Prime Minister of
Germany?
Of Israel at the time?
Oh, Israel.
Naftali Bennett. Naftali Bennett.
I was going to say the old one. What was his name?
Netanyahu. No, Netanyahu's come back again.
He's come back again?
Yeah, he's the Jewish yo-yo man. Okay. Yeah, he always comes back. And Naftali Bennett, at the beginning of this conflict, so a few weeks in, said that he came out and he publicly stated that he has been stopped by the US and the UK, from brokering a peace deal between dancing clown Zelensky.
I was about to get into him,
Well, we're going to get into him in a moment. Between dancing clown Zelensky and President Putin. And so unfortunately, just one moment, Naftali Bennett, the Israeli Prime Minister, was prevented from doing so. That shocked me. Because everybody tells me that the Jews rule the world, but they certainly not ruling this one, because he had zero influence. And not only that, Naftali Bennett was forced to walk back on the comments that he made.
Which were?
The comments that he said that Britain and America stopped him from brokering a deal.
What do you mean he had to walk back on them?
He walked back. So initially he said that he was stopped, and then afterwards he says, "Well, I wasn't really stopped." So
why would he say it in the first place?
Well, as I said to you, Naftali Bennett was clearly speaking the truth, and when he spoke about the behaviour of the British, I mean, you saw the maniacal behaviour of Boris Johnson. And head racist and child sniffer Joe Biden. In fact, I'll take that back because this is a serious video.
He said child sniffer.
Yeah, I shouldn't say that. I'm actually going to take that back because we're really in serious times, and I really shouldn't go into ad hominems. But the truth is that when someone as powerful as the Israeli Prime Minister is slapped down, then something clearly is going on in the background that we are not seeing.
So let's get into what I said I was going to get into. What are your thoughts on Zelensky?
I think that Zelensky is part of the problem. When Zelensky came to power, I think it was in 2019, might be 2018, I can't remember. Very tired at the moment. But when Zelensky came to power, what was his pitch? What was the mandate? I've come to make peace. This is what Zelensky said. Now, since that time, we've learned that the question we should ask...
He didn't do that while he was dressed in the latex, did he?
Well, he was dressed in latex. Apparently, he was a comedian, but he wasn't funny. And
Right.
he dressed and danced in some really revealing clothes. I'm not quite certain where he came from, because I understand, or I'd like to think that I understand some of the Ukrainian mentality, and they're very macho in their outlook as men. And I was quite shocked that Zelensky was first, quote unquote, voted into
He was just
power.
getting his LBGTQ on, that's all.
Well, anyway, it is Pride Month, by the way.
It is Pride Month, yeah.
Apparently, Zelensky is someone that we should look at very closely, because for me, he has been imposed on this country with a very definitive mandate, and for me, it's to act as a pawn in a proxy war that is going on between America and Russia. That's what's going on at the moment. I find him duplicitous. I find him fraudulent. I find him a liar, and I find him to be a dictator. Now, we know that they have shut down the opposition in Ukraine. Many people who have been jailed. They've closed down TV channels. They've imprisoned some Christians in Ukraine. We know that he's a supporter of Nazis. Some people say, oh, but he is Jewish. He may call himself Jewish, but many of these people who call themselves Jewish, it's malleable, the term, and they use it when it suits them. And
because we already spoke about the Nazis that are actually part of the army.
Absolutely. And I would say that if you look at the behavior of President Zelensky, he's seen that his country is being systematically degraded. Yeah, he's seen that his infrastructure is being slowly taken apart. And he does not have the wherewithal, yeah, as much as he is controlled. If Zelensky came out tomorrow and said, I want peace,
what would happen?
What could happen? The truth is this, is that Zelensky is being controlled by the Pentagon. He's not being controlled by Ukrainian politicians.
That's a huge statement, you know, big bro.
Well, the thing is, well, don't ask me. Yeah, ask Naftali Bennett. Do you understand? Don't ask me. Ask the plethora of people, real clever people, far cleverer than I am. I'm not clever at all. You know, you look at academics like, for example, Professor John Mearsheimer. For example, you know, Google him. Don't watch me. Stop this video. Click on Professor John Mearsheimer and hear what Professor John Mearsheimer has to say. It's actually quite shocking who and what Zelensky is and why he was placed in that position. Do I believe he even won that election? Actually, I don't. But we've had...
So now we're talking about corruption now.
Well, can I just say to you, it wasn't me, you know, that said that Ukraine is the most corrupt nation in Europe. Yeah, that was the American Congress.
Over the last few days, numerous Ukrainian officials were fired from their posts or arrested after several faced allegations of corruption in the country's media. The accusations against them vary. Ukraine's acting Minister for Regional Development was arrested after the country's Anti-Corruption Bureau accused him of receiving over $400,000 in bribes. The country's Deputy Defense Minister stepped down from his post after revelations were made that his ministry was buying military provisions, including food for troops, at inflated prices. Then, President Zelensky's own Deputy Chief of Staff resigned after journalists revealed that he had acquired a habit of using expensive sports cars to travel around the country. This happened even as the country's economy was being decimated by Russian missiles. In total, several key ministers, 5 deputy ministers, and numerous regional governors and top officials have either been fired or asked to resign from their jobs in a matter of days. This scandal places Ukraine's long struggle with corruption in the spotlight. The fact is that the country has struggled with the corruption crisis since it became independent after the fall of the Soviet Union in 1991.
So from 2016, they said it was the most corrupt nation in Europe.
Well, they're schizophrenic.
And now we're in 2023, and all of a sudden they're friends.
Well, they're schizophrenic, the Americans, because as I said to you, they've now removed the restriction on funding neo-Nazis. Isn't that interesting? But like, certainly from the time the West engineered the coup in 2014, and I think it was Yankovic, I remember quite rightly. As I said, I shouldn't be filming when I'm tired. But from the time you had that coup, from the time the EU tried to insert themselves once again in 2014, giving strength and succor to Nazis to continue and carry on their killing spree in the Russian-speaking areas, from the time Ukraine decided that they wanted to be members of NATO, literally putting Russian missiles on their border and threatening the security and the integrity of the Russian state, you know, it's very, very difficult to see this man as anything more than a puppet. Because we all think in terms of the world of separate countries. The people who actually run and control this don't actually do that. Yeah, they think very, very differently, as I said, to what we think, to what we believe. Now, look, I said this earlier on, what the Russian objective is. They will have to do what Russia says, no matter what anyone tells you.
Ukraine will have to.
Ukraine will have to. Yeah, NATO
That's
will
not
have
what
to
we're
back
taught, though,
down.
bro. We're not shown that, though.
No, I understand that, but look, let me tell you, Macron, is drifting away.
Of France.
Yeah, Macron of France is drifting away. He has his own problems. He's drifting away, from this militaristic adventure, which is American and British led. The Germans are furious, behind the scenes with America, least of all because Americans blew up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline.
I was coming to that.
They blew up.
That has been said. That it is
the Nord Stream 2
let me just
pipeline.
say this.
Is this mine?
Yeah, that's yours.
Okay.
It has been said that one of the most non-spoken about, but one of the most heinous things that has happened in this modern day has been the blowing up of the Nord Stream pipeline.
Well, I can go further, and I can say it is the greatest ecological disaster in the history of this world. And you'll see a video in a moment of President Biden threatening to do this 4 to 5 months before it actually occurs.
Thank you, Mr.
Let me answer the first question first. If Russia invades, that means tanks or troops crossing the border of Ukraine again. Then there will be no longer a Nord Stream 2. We will bring an end to it.
How will you do that exactly, since the project and control of the project is within Germany's control?
We will, I promise you, we'll be able to do it.
Now, look, it wasn't me that said it. People are going to say, oh, you're a conspiracy theorist. Look, it wasn't me that said it. It was Seymour Hersh that said it. It was John Mearsheimer.
Who is Seymour Hersh?
Seymour Hersh was the investigative reporter who broke the story that led to the fall of Richard Nixon. I think it was 73, if my mind serves me correctly. And the corruption and the lies and the deceit at the heart of that administration. And he brought him down by uncovering what was going on within the Nixon administration. It was Seymour Hersh that used all of these contacts within the intelligence agency circles, within the Pentagon, within the military, and so on and so forth, and gave a very accurate description of what he says has happened. So I don't want you to think that it's me who is saying this in their conspiracy theories. There are people, as I said, far brighter than I could ever wish to be, who have looked at this, they've investigated it, and this is what's happened. Now, the Germans know what's happened. The Germans invested billions, along with Russia, in building that pipeline from up in the...
So can we describe what it is? What is the Nord Stream pipeline?
Right, the new pipeline that runs from the outer regions of Russia through Russia into Germany. And Germany had invested a great deal of monies, along with the majority of the monies from the Russians. Essentially, it was that pipeline that guaranteed keeping gas prices down and the German people warm during the winter.
Right.
Yeah. In the greatest act of ecological terrorism ever committed on this planet Earth, yeah, Joe Biden gave permission, yeah, for that to be destroyed. Now look, if acts of terrorism,
Have they admitted it?
well, no.
Have America admitted blowing up that pipeline?
Look, let me just say to you, it doesn't matter whether they've admitted it or not. We're involved in a propaganda war. And like most wars, it will take many years for the truth to actually come out. There are things which are coming out now about 9/11, which is 20 years later, that couldn't have been said at that particular time.
Yeah.
And so the point that I'm making is it's quite clear. Joe Biden made clear, not me, Joe Biden, Joe Biden made clear that this was going to happen, and it happened. And the thing is that the amount of propaganda that was spewed out, it was the Russians that did it in an act of whatever you want to call it. Absolute nonsense. Absolute nonsense. Russia is in a fight for its very survival as a sovereign state, because we know that the Americans, you can call it NATO if you wish, but the Americans want Russia to be broken up into 3 or possibly 4 different states, so weakening them on the global
That
stage.
they can control.
So they can control. As I said, there was a time, especially after 1991 with the breakup of the USSR, that America was the sole superpower on this earth. They are no longer the sole superpower. You have China, which is a peer competitor from an industrial, militaristic, financial viewpoint. America doesn't like this, and so now you have stories in the paper that China is a threat to the world, and we've got to deal with China. And look what China are doing in the southern China Sea, and so on and so forth. And they've got the Filipinos riled up, and the Japanese riled up, and the Australians are all riled up. This is a very deliberate policy of the Americans, where they use their friends in the media, in the legacy media, in order to push a narrative when they are seeking to construct a narrative around a forthcoming conflict. We saw this with Saddam Hussein.
Yeah.
Yeah, we saw this with Saddam Hussein. They won't tell you that they created Saddam Hussein. They put him in power in 1968 when he was just an ordinary member of the Ba'ath Party. They put him in power.
Well, in my experience with America, when it comes to CIA and FBI and the secret services, they put people in power, and then once those people in power go against them, the British do the same. They find a way in which to get rid of them. So if we talk about Patrice Lumumba, right, they got rid of Patrice Lumumba. If we talk about Thomas Sankara, they got rid of Thomas Sankara.
Absolutely.
If you look at even Zimbabwe, what's his name now? What have I forgotten?
Mugabe.
Mugabe.
Yeah.
And we look at what happened with the Queen, with Robert Mugabe, and how he was Sir Robert Mugabe initially, and then once he went against them, all of a sudden he was a dictator and he was a despot and all this kind of stuff. And it's just like you said, a modus operandi.
Yeah.
For a lot of these, I guess, European nations. I recently put on my channel a snippet of Ankira Chimborikwo.
Yes.
And she was speaking about France and what France was doing to French countries within Africa.
Yeah.
European nations seem to have a modus operandi when it comes to anyone that, I guess, goes against what they want.
Yeah, and as I said to you, that it's a tactic that that's been used time and time again, and it's not a new tactic, but it's an effective tactic, and it's effective because it's worked for them. One of the problems is that you cannot hold back the tide of what is coming, and what I mean by that is that if you look at, say, if we can just put Ukraine on hold for a moment. If you look at
We're going to get to China after this.
oh, okay, great. Okay, well, I'll probably wait then. But like certainly, if you look at what is occurring in India, yeah, India in the last few years, yeah, has doubled their GDP, doubled, yeah, just like that. If you look at China, I have to mention this because we can speak about China afterwards. But I have to mention this only because it's in my mind at the moment. Is that if you look at, say, for example, 2010, the GDP of China was 6 trillion.
Right.
Go to 2021, the GDP of China is 19 trillion. Yeah.
So it tripled.
Tripled, yeah, in a very short space of time. China also has what's called the Belt and Road Initiative.
Yes. We need to get into that.
In 150 countries around the world. China has lifted up to 800 million Chinese from the depths of poverty
Into like the middle
quote,
classes.
Absolutely
Yeah.
correct. And if you look at what China is doing, you know, once upon a time it was an out-and-out communist country, and they now have a mix of what you'd say is communism and capitalism. But the government clearly rules. In the West, as you know, government is run on behalf of the billionaire and trillionaire class.
I thought you were going to say the people. I was about to say, what?
No, definitely.
I was going to say, what?
It's run on behalf of the billionaire and trillionaire class who purchase politicians. It's the reason why you have so many
Big tech, big pharma.
well, all of them. It's not
Yeah.
big pharma, the military, the media, and so on and so forth. We act in our countries on behalf of them. We give them the tax breaks. You know, we refuse to tax them the way in which we should. They run policy. It's very different in China. In fact, I can give you the example. It might not be a good one for you, but it's an interesting one nevertheless. When Jack Ma ran
Alibaba.
That's right. Well done. Yeah, Jack Ma ran Alibaba, and when he sought to criticize the government, they disappeared Jack Ma.
For how long? Because he's back now, isn't he?
He's back now for about 6, 7, 8 months. Yeah.
When you say disappeared, what does that mean?
Disappeared. You didn't see him. He was gone. Yeah, he was gone. And yes, it was a terrible thing to have happened. And how can you support that? It's not that I support. It's the principle whereby billionaires remember, if you're a billionaire, you will act on behalf of you being a billionaire. Yeah, very few philanthropic billionaires. Yeah, many of them have this psychopath gene, which is why they're able to get as wealthy as they are. You know, the truth is this: is that in this country, in the UK, in America, you can name the billionaires who what do we call it? They speak with their chest. Yeah, primarily because they know they have to be listened to. If a particular senator or a congressman or an MP oversteps the mark, yeah, what happens? You want me to tell you what happens? Yeah, their opponent will be seriously funded and they will be out. Yeah, they will be out of politics for good.
You're talking as if politics is about money and not about democracy.
Politics is for sale. Democracy is a facade.
I thought politics was about democracy.
Well, look, let me just say...
I didn't think it was about money, big bro. What are you talking about? You sound like a conspiracy theorist, bro.
Yeah, well, you know, as I said to you, if you want, what do the kids call it? If you want receipts, I'll give you the receipts, and then we can speak about it.
Yeah, you're gonna need receipts because you know you sound like a conspiracy theorist. You should have a tinfoil hat on or something. That's what they say. You should have a tinfoil hat on, right?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting because because you said that. There is something, I mean, we spoke about this yesterday, and I want to point out something to you about democracy and language and the way in which we're manipulated literally every single day. And I had some of my paperwork, and my paperwork's literally all over the place.
See, that's because you're a conspiracy theorist.
Because I'm a conspiracy
You ain't got no receipts, bro.
Thank you. You're right. But I